This is definitely the smallest and most efficient computer Apple has ever released. This is the base model Mac Mini, and I've seen it for as low as $450, and that's really cheap for what Apple is delivering. And in today's video, I want to share my experience after using it as my main computer for several weeks. I'll compare it a bit to the M3 Pro and the M4, the chips in my other MacBooks Pro, and also with a 24-inch iMac I used for quite a while. Before diving into the review, let me explain how I use this computer. We use it a lot for video editing in Final Cut, developing apps and services, mostly using Python and a bit of Swift. We also rely on AI tools like Cursor to help with projects, and of course, the basics, browsing the web, replying to emails, watching videos, the usual stuff. So this Mac Mini is the base model, like I said, and the only upgrade we added was the 10 gigabit Ethernet port. I really wanted to get the 512 gigabytes SSD version, but we ended up with the 256 gigabytes one, and I'll explain why in a bit. The 10 gigabit Ethernet port gives me access to our server, so I can store all my files and even edit videos directly from our NAS. I only need local space on the Mac Mini for installed apps. With 256 gigabytes, storage will fill up fast. Right now, we've still got around 60 to 70 gigabytes free, so it's okay, but ideally 512 gigabytes would have been perfect for us. Now, the reason why we didn't go for the 512 gigabytes version is because we found this one in Apple's refurbished section with around 200 euros discount. So it was a great deal, but I definitely recommend getting a bit more storage if you can. About the 10 gigabit port, our setup has 5 12 terabytes hard drives in a Synology NAS and 2 terabytes NVMe SSDs. So that's nearly 4 terabytes in SSDs alone. Connected via this port, I get read and write speeds of 800 to 1000 megabytes per second, so it's like having an SSD plugged directly into the Mac. And the best part, everyone on our network can access the folder. Everything stays centralized, and if I switch computers, the files are still there. Now, can't you just buy a 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter? And sure you can, but they're expensive, bulky, they tend to get really hot and often cause issues over time. Apple doesn't charge much for this upgrade, so for us it was totally worth getting the built-in port. It's more convenient and reliable. This Mac Mini has several USB-C ports, and that was honestly one of the things that I was most excited about when switching machines, because before I used a MacBook Pro with the M3 Pro chip and I depended on a dock. I did have a really good one from CallDigit, but it still wasn't perfect. It would occasionally glitch and I'd have to unplug and plug it back in, so not 100% reliable. That completely changed with the Mac Mini. It has 5 USB-C ports, and in the base model with the M4 chip, the rear ports are already Thunderbolt 4. If you want Thunderbolt 5, you will need the Mac Mini with the M4 Pro chip, but honestly, Thunderbolt 4 is more than enough for what I do. None of my peripherals need more speed than that. For daily use, 3 ports would be enough for me, but having 5 gives me some breathing room, which is great. I plug everything in directly, no dock needed. The setup is simpler and more reliable. And for most people, this is going to be more than enough. And if you're tired of depending on hubs or docks, you'll understand the peace of mind that comes with just plugging everything directly into your computer. Performance-wise, it's amazing. I already knew the M4 because my previous MacBook Pro also had the base M4 chip, so I already knew it was solid, but I was curious to see how it compared to the M3 Pro, especially when exporting and rendering videos. And honestly, in day-to-day use, I barely notice a difference, only when there are lots of effects or heavy layers, but that's rare in the kind of videos that I produce. If your work requires constant heavy graphics processing, then it might be worth investing in a Pro chip or even a Mac Studio. But for most people, including us, the base Mac Mini handles everything just fine. I export 10 to 15 minute videos in 2 to 3 minutes, sometimes even less. And I usually don't even wait around for it to finish. It's so fast, it doesn't interrupt my workflow. Now, fun fact, we mounted the Mac Mini under the desk. We bought a mount from AliExpress, stuck it on with double-sided tape, and done. Super clean setup. And of course, it's so small and cute that even if you leave it on the desk, it looks great in any space. Now, if you're thinking about getting this Mac Mini, I think it's worth considering a few upgrades at the time of purchase. In my opinion, for most people, the 16 gigabytes of RAM it comes with is more than enough. Personally, I've never needed a Mac with more than that. I've always been able to handle video editing and programming just fine with 16 gigabytes. But if you're thinking about getting 24 gigs or more, I'd say pause and ask yourself if the Mac Mini is really the right model for you, because honestly, if you need that much RAM, maybe a Mac Studio makes more sense. I always say this, if you're going to move away from the base model Mac Mini, it might be time to consider a more powerful machine. The upgrade I really think it's worth it is the SSD. I highly recommend going with the 512 gigabytes version instead of 256. I am currently using the 256 gigabytes model myself because it was such a good deal on Apple refurbished site. But if not for that, I would have gone with the 512 gigabytes. And as for 1 terabyte, I honestly wouldn't do that. Apple charges a lot for that upgrade, and I don't think it's worth it. If you need more space, here's what I do. Stick with 512 gigabytes and get an external SSD. And if you want to go further, you can even install macOS on an external NVMe SSD via Thunderbolt and run everything from there. A lot of people think it's complicated to do that or worry about accidentally unplugging it, but think about it. The Mac Mini is just going to sit there on your desk. You're not going to be moving it around, so there is not much risk. Also, a good external SSD connected via Thunderbolt 4 will have speeds very close to Apple's internal SSDs. So from a cost-benefit perspective, it makes a lot more sense. And just to reinforce what I said earlier, if there's one upgrade I think it's almost essential is the 10 gigabit Ethernet port. Even if you don't have internet that fast yet, or you don't use a home server now, it's something you might want to invest in the future. And honestly, having everything centralized on the server without having to plug and unplug a bunch of SSDs make a huge difference. So if you're going to invest in something on this Mac Mini, I'd seriously consider the 512 gigabytes of SSD and the 10 gigabit Ethernet port. Now, Mac Mini or iMac? That's the question you have to ask yourself. The iMac is beautiful and ready to go out of the box, but with the Mac Mini, you get to choose your own monitor, keyboard, mouse, and speakers. For example, I use a 27-inch 4K LG monitor, Edifier speakers, a Keychron mechanical keyboard, and the Logitech MX Master 3 mouse that I love. In the end, I spent less than I would have on an iMac and got better peripherals. The only thing the iMac wins on is the 5K display, but I prefer having a bigger screen and peripherals I actually like. And there's also the advantage that in the future, if I want to upgrade just the computer, I can keep the rest of the setup that I already have. And unlike the Mac Mini, the iMac doesn't have the 10 gigabit Ethernet port option. If you want that, you'll have to get the adapter, which is bulky and expensive. You could also compare it to the base M4 MacBook Pro. It's portable, but costs $600 to $700 more. And you still need a dock or have to unplug cables every time you want to take it somewhere. So maybe it makes more sense to have a Mac Mini as your main computer at home and then get a MacBook Air for portability. That's what I do. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, this Mac Mini with a 10 gigabit port costs just 700 euros in Apple's refurbished section here in Italy. To sum it up, I'm loving this computer. If you're looking for a desktop to work, watch videos, and do everything efficiently without spending too much, this Mac Mini is hard to beat. I'm super happy with the setup and don't plan on switching anytime soon. Also, I'll post separate videos showing how we edit using the server, how we set everything up, and how we solved a few small issues that came up, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I also want to share my full desk setup, so for now, just let me say that this Mac Mini is an amazing machine. I don't think I've ever met someone who bought one and regretted it, unless they expected Mac Studio level performance. For most people, this is the dream computer. Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it and let me know in the comments what you think. See you in the next one.